Section 10 of Abe and Mawruss. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Abe and Mawruss, Being Further Adventures of Potash and Perlmutter by Montague Glass. Section 10. Chapter 7. Part 1. Brothers All. "What's the use talking, Mawruss?" Abe Potash protested. "The fellow couldn't even talk 10 words English at all." "Sure, I know," Mawruss Perlmutter admitted. "But he would quick learn." "Quick learn!" Abe exclaimed. "What do you mean, quick learn? Nowadays I never seen the like. A greenhorn comes here from Russlin, which he's such an ignoramus he don't even know his own name, understand me, and he expects right away to get a job in a cloak and suit concern uptown, where they would learn him how he should talk English, and at the same time paying $10 a week. Actually, Mawruss, them fellows think they're doing you a favor if they ruin 10 garments a day on you in exchange for learning 'em English. Me, when I come over from Russlin, I was also so grossartig. I was glad to get a job learning on shirts in a sub-cellar, and the boss boards me for wages. I got an elegant bill of fare, too, I bet you, Mawruss. Every day for dinner, salt and herring and potatoes, except Sundays, there's onions extra. And did that fellow learn me English, Mawruss? Oh, so a shtuck. I must go to night school to learn English, Mawruss. And I did, Mawruss, and they learnt me good there, Mawruss. And so this here fella you're talking about, he should do the same." "We wouldn't got to learn him English, Abe," Mawruss declared. "The fellow's a bright, smart fellow, and he could pick it up quick enough." "Sure, I know," Abe rejoined. "And pick it up a whole lot of other things, too, Mawruss. Silks and velvets and buttons and fellers picks up." "Not this fella, Abe," Mawruss said. "He's from a decent, respectable people in the old country. He's studying for a doctor already when he comes over here. But he gets into trouble on account he belongs to a politics society over there, so he's got to run away. The fella's a bright fella, Abe." "I know them bright fellas, Mawruss. Sit up till all hours of the night in Canal Street coffee houses, killing off Grand Dukes. Grand Dukes has got to make a living the same like anybody else, Mawruss. And anyhow, Mawruss, when a fella comes over here from Russlin, Mawruss, he ain't got no business bothering his head about Grand Dukes. The way things is nowadays in the cloak and suit trade, Mawruss, a fella's got all he could attend to holding on to his job." Mawruss shrugged. "Let's give the fellow a show anyhow, Abe," he rejoined. "And if he don't soon make good, we quick fire him, you understand?" "That's what you said about that fella Harkavy, which we give him a job in our cutting room, Mawruss. All the time he works for us acts so dumb, like a 10-year-old child. And soon as we fire him, Mawruss, he goes to work by Kleiman and Ellenbogen, and turns out a couple of styles, which the least them highwaymen makes out of him is $5,000. "How should I know what Harkavy could do with Kleiman and Ellenbogen, Abe?" Mawruss cried. "You're the prophet of this here concern, Abe. Always you're predicting to me tomorrow what's going to happen yesterday." "Well, what's forbye is forbye, Mawruss," Abe retorted. "And if I got to stand here all day and schmooze with you, Mawruss, go ahead and hire the fella. Only one thing I'm saying to you, Mawruss. Don't tell me afterward that I was in favor of the fella from the start, 'cause I ain't." With this ultimatum, Abe glanced toward the cutting room, where sat a tall, stooping figure, holding in his hands a peaked cap. "Only to look at the fella gives me a crank, Mawruss," Abe continued. "So if you're going to hire him, Mawruss, do me the favor and give him a couple of dollars out of the safe so he should get a shave and a haircut and a new hat." Mawruss nodded and started for the cutting room when Abe called him back. "For my part, Mawruss, I don't care what people says, you understand?" he declared. "But if we got a couple of them 34th Street buyers around here and they sees our work people has got such shoes which their toes sticking out already, Mawruss, what do they think of us? Am I right or wrong?" "Sure, I know," Mawruss said. But nothing, Mawruss," Abe concluded. "For $3 we should make suckers out of ourselves. Don't stand there like a fool, Mawruss. Give the fella $5 he should buy himself a pair of shoes and fertig." The transformation begun in Caesar Kovalenko by a haircut, and the shave was made complete when Mawruss, accompanied by Kovalenko's cousin, went with him to a retail clothing establishment. There Caesar discarded forever his cap, top boots, and frogged overcoat, and emerged, but for his vocabulary, a naturalized citizen of the cloak and suit trade. Now all he's got to do, Morris said, is to work hard, and we would quick be making good wages. Sure, the cousin replied. At first, maybe he'd be a little dumb on account he got a whole lot of experiences lately. Experiences? Morris asked. What for experiences? Well, in the first place, the cousin proceeded, 2 years ago he's studying for a doctor in the University of Kharkov, and next door to him, one house by the other, lives a fellow which ain't got nothing to say against him, you understand? Only he goes to work and sends a package to the chief of police, Mr. Perlmutter. When they open the package, you understand, inside is something fixed. Mind you, Mr. Perlmutter, I wouldn't say nothing if it would be really the chief of police which would open the package, but always it's some poor schnorrer which the chief of police calls in from the street. This time it was a fellow by the name of Levin, a decent, respectable young fella. His father was a Rav. The old man is coming over this week, you understand, Mr. Perlmutter? But when the chief of police sends out Levin in the backyard, he should open the package. Understand me? That's the last anyone sees, either from the package or either from Levin. Morris clicked his tongue sympathetically. And what they done to this fellow which sends the package? He asked. Him? They didn't do nothing, Mr. Perlmutter, the cousin replied. But Caesar here, they put it all on him. First, they're making him arrested, and then the police pretty near kill him, and the Cossacks take him from Kharkov to Odessa. He should get tried, and then they pretty near kill him there. And if it wouldn't be that we're sending over to give a judge there a couple of thousand rubles, they would right away shoot him. Anyhow, Mr. Perlmutter, 1 year my cousin sits in prison there, and then we're sending over a couple of thousand rubles more, which give him the fella what runs the prison. So my cousin sneaks out of there, and he comes over here to this country. Morris gazed at the neatly clad figure who walked quietly along beside him. You wouldn't think it to look at him, he said. But anyhow, I do my best to see he gets a good show, and he would quick learn, I bet you. By this time they had reached Potash and Perlmutter's premises, and the cousin shook hands warmly with Morris. You got a good heart, Mr. Perlmutter, he declared fervently. And you wouldn't lose money supposing you did pay him $8 a week to start. Morris paused before passing indoors. Listen here to me, he said. Maybe I got a good heart, maybe I ain't. But your cousin starts on $5 a week, understand me? And if he gets $6 inside of a month, he would got to earn it. Despite this assertion, however, it was barely 3 weeks before Caesar Kovalenko was earning and receiving $8 a week, for never in their business experience had Abe and Mawruss employed a more intelligent workman. Not only did he exhibit great promise as an assistant cutter, but he had acquired a knowledge of English sufficient for his needs. If the fella keeps on, Abe, Mawruss said, we would soon got to give him another raise. He's a wonder. Abe nodded gloomily. You can get all the wonders you want, Mawruss. To learn cutting at $8 a week, he said. And supposing he does pick up English quick, Mawruss, a fella could be a regular Henry Shakespeare, you understand, and he would be any better a garment cutter on that account. Am I right or wrong? Well, certainly it don't do no harm that Kovalenko understands a little English, Mawruss commented. Sure not, Abe agreed satirically. Because the quicker he learns English, Mawruss, the quicker he would copy our styles and find a job with a competitor. Take this here Kharkovy, for instance. Only this morning I seen Felix Geigerman in the subway, and he says that Kleiman and Ellenbogen is showing at $1 less on the garment. A Ringer for our style, 4022, which we sold him, Mawruss. Now, who tells them suckers how they could cut down on the buttons and the lining, Mawruss, and put 1 pleat less on the skirt, Mawruss? I suppose you did, or I did, Mawruss, ain't it? He paused for a reply, but none came. And yet, Mawruss, he concluded, that fellow Kharkovy was a wonder too, and I suppose, Mawruss, that the way he picked up English would be a big consolation to us, Mawruss, if a good customer like Geigerman leaves us and goes over to Kleiman and Ellenbogen. Mawruss grunted scornfully. You're all the time looking for trouble, Abe, he said. If we would lose as many customers as you're talking about, Abe, we wouldn't got a decent concern left on our books at all. You got to give Geigerman credit for knowing a good garment when he sees it. Sure, I know, Mawruss, Abe replied. Geigerman knows a good garment when he sees it, but his customers don't. If Geigerman could get it for $1 less than ours, garments would look like ours and is like ours. All but the buttons and the pleats and the skirt. We could kiss ourselves goodbye with business, no matter how many bright greenhorns we got it in our cutting room." "Get weg," Morris exclaimed. "You don't know what you're talking about, Abe." Nevertheless, when Felix Geigerman, the well-known Harlem dry goods merchant and violin dilettante, entered Potash and Perlmutter's showroom the next morning, Morris greeted him with some misgiving. "Hello, Felix," he said. "You giving us a repeat order so soon already on them 4022s?" Felix shook his head. "I got a few words to say to Abe, Morris," he replied. "Is he in now?" Morris smiled amiably, although he was convinced that Felix's visit boded a cancellation of the 4022s. "He ain't in now," he answered, "but if you wait a few minutes, he'll be right back." He returned hastily to the office, for he knew that if Abe found them in conversation on his return, he would impute the cancellation of the order to something Morris had said. Thus Felix was left alone in the showroom, save for Caesar Kovalenko, who plied a feather duster industrially among the sample racks. As he worked, Caesar whistled Russian melody, half sad, half cheerful, and Felix paused midway in the lighting of a cigar. It was the opening theme in the second movement of Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony, and Caesar's rendition of it was not only true to pitch, but he managed to introduce certain nuances that to Felix proclaimed the born musician. "What's that you're whistling?" he inquired, and Caesar smiled. "Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony," he replied, and then he reached around to his hip pocket. "See, I got music." He handed a paper-covered miniature score to Geigerman, who opened it at random. "Ha!" Felix exclaimed as his eye lit on a familiar phrase in the last movement. He hummed it over, and Caesar joined him in a clear, musical baritone. They were thus engaged when a tall, broad-shouldered individual entered the showroom. "Sorry to interrupt you, gentlemen," he said, "but is the boss in?" "In the back office there," Felix replied. "Will you tell him Mr. Gunter would like to see him?" the newcomer continued. "I will if you want me to," Felix said, "but I'm here only a customer." "Excuse me," Mr. Gunter apologized. "I was talking about the other fella, however." He proceeded to the office and engaged Morris in earnest conversation for several minutes. They returned to the showroom just as Caesar was replacing the score in his hip pocket. The motion was too much for Mr. Gunter, whose occupation made him nervous, and he plunged his hand into his overcoat and brought out a shining metallic object. There was a sharp struggle, and Caesar Kovalenko leaned against the partition with his wrists encircled by a pair of handcuffs. "Come along quiet," said Mr. Gunter calmly, "or I'll knock your block off." At this juncture, the elevator door banged open, and Abe came into the showroom. "What's the matter here?" he cried. Mr. Gunter smiled. "I'm a United States Deputy Marshal," he proclaimed, "and I'm arresting this guy under a warrant duly issued in the Southern District of New York. I got a taxi cab downstairs, and if any of you gentlemen is a friend of the prisoner, yous can come along to the marshal's office." Morris darted into the office and reappeared with his hat and coat. "Abe," he said, "you stay here in the store. I'll go down with him." Abe frowned. "One moment, Morris," he cried. "I didn't go so quick as all that. First, we would find out what he makes this young feller arrested for." The deputy marshal nodded. "That's all right. You're entitled to know it. He's arrested on the complaint of the Russian consulate for something he did in Russia 2 years ago." "In Russia!" Abe exclaimed. 2 years ago! Morris, do me a favor. You stay in the store, and I go with him." Felix Geigerman placed his hand on Abe's arm. "Say, looky here, Abe," he said. "I'll tell you the truth. I'm pretty busy today here to cancel them 4022s, but now I don't care at all. You could ship them goods if you want to, Abe. But one thing I ask you as a favor, let me go with him. I don't care what the other fella says. I'm just now talking to this here young fella, and if he done anything in Russia, understand me, I would eat it. So you stay here, tend to business, and I'll go with him. Morris drew on his overcoat with force sufficient to rip the sleeve lining. Nathan, the shipping clerk, could tend to the store, Abe, he declared, and we'll all go with him. In the first place, Morris, Abe said, after they had returned from the United States Commissioner's office, where Caesar Kovalenko had been arraigned and committed without bail to the Tombs, in the first place, what are we bothering our heads about this young fella? Of course, when I was down there, Morris, and see the fella from the Russian consul's office, which he's got a face, Morris, hard like iron, you understand? I didn't say nothing, but the way you're going to work a telephone to Henry D. Feldman and everything, Morris, before we get through with him, it would cost us anyhow a couple of $100. Geigerman said he'd go half, Morris said. Sure, I know, Morris, but just because Geigerman acts like a sucker, Morris, why should we get ourselves into it too? Furthermore, Morris, how do we know Geigerman would go half? He's that kind of a fellow, Morris. When he says something, he don't take it so particular. He should stick to it, Morris. One day he gives us an order, and the next day he cancels it, Morris, and that's the kind of man he is. He didn't cancel it, Abe, Morris cried. He was going to cancel, but he changed his mind. Sure, he changed his mind, Abe interrupted. And what's going to hinder him changing his mind on the other proposition, Morris? You could take it from me, Morris, when the time comes he should pay up. Understand me? It'll be a case of nix wissen, and don't you forget it. Morris shrugged impatiently. No, Abe, what could we do? Once in a while we couldn't help ourselves, you understand? Should we let this poor greenhorn be sent back to Russland? And he ain't got a relative in the world, understand me, except his cousin, which he's just as poor as Kovalenko. That's all right, Morris, Abe declared. I ain't kicking we should help the fellow. All I'm saying is there's lots of our people which we got more dollars as we got dimes. Take Moses M. Steuerman, for instance. That's a fellow which he's got a big charity fellow. Understand? Why shouldn't he help Kovalenko? Well, in the first place, no one tells him about it, Abe, Morris said. And in the second place, but why don't we tell him about it, Morris? Abe interrupted. Why don't you go now to see him, Morris, and tell him all about it? Me go down to see him, Abe? Morris cried. Why, the fellow's a multimillionaire. With such people like that, I couldn't open my mouth at all. Why don't you go down to see him? Why should I go down? Abe asked. You're the lodge brother here, Morris, ain't it? You're the one which you always sitting up there till all hours of the night making motions. I couldn't make a motion to save my life, Morris. You know it. Sure, I know, Morris protested. But lodge meetings is something else again. You know, a fella could talk at a lodge meeting, and what is it? A couple of young lawyers, which they couldn't even pay their laundry bills, you understand? And a dozen other fellas, insurance brokers, or the cigar dealers, and most of them old-timers at that. Why should I be afraid to say a little something to 'em? But with a fellow like Moses M. Steuerman, which his folks is bankers in Frankfurt on the Main, when Carnegie and Vanderbilt with all them other goyim was a new beginners yet, Abe, that's a different proposition entirely. Abe nodded and remained silent for a few minutes. Might Felix Geigerman would go down and see him, Morris, he suggested finally. Wouldn't do no harm. We should ring him up anyhow. Go as far as you like, Abe, Morris said, and Abe started immediately for the telephone. I spoke to Felix, Morris, he announced a few minutes later, and Felix said he'd go right down and see him. He ain't so stuck up on paying Feldman a couple $100 neither. Morris snorted indignantly. If he's going to be charitable, Abe, he said, why don't you be a sport? We could easy stand a couple $100. That's all right, Morris, Abe declared. Business is business and charity is charity, you understand? But even in charity, Morris, it don't do no harm to keep the expenses down. 2 hours afterward, Felix Geigerman entered the showroom, his face glistening with perspiration. Well, boys, he almost shouted, I seen him, and he says he would call in here on his way uptown. Who would call in? Morris asked. Moses M. Steuerman, Felix replied. It was a Tchaikovsky fourth that fixed him, Morris. I told him the young fella carries round with him an orchestral score, and right away he says he'd come up. For years I see Mr. Steuermann at the Philharmonics and the Boston Symphony's Morris. I didn't know who he was at all. I always thought he was something to do with music publishing concern." "Steuermann got something to do with the music publishing concern?" Morris exclaimed. "I'm surprised to hear you. You should talk that way, Felix." "Well, when you see in and year out a fella goes to every concert, what is," Felix explained, "naturally you get an idea he's in the music business, ain't it?" "That's what you think, Felix," Abe said, taking up the cudgels in defense of Steuermann. "But you can take it from me, Felix, if a fellow like Steuermann seemingly fools away his time at concerts, understand me, he ain't doing it for nothing. He probably gets some business out of it. Seem like a lot of fellows you would think is making suckers of themselves going to lodge meetings, Felix. Most of 'em sells many a big bill of goods that way." "That ain't here nor there, Abe," Felix rejoined. "The point is, Steuermann will be up here at 5 o'clock. So, what are you going to tell him when he calls?" "Me tell him?" Abe cried. "Why, I wouldn't be here at all. I gotta go. Now. See? Now. Customer. Prince Clarence." "You ain't got to do nothing of the kind, Abe," Morris retorted angrily. "You're going to stay right here and talk to that fellow when he comes. What do you think? I'm going to be the goat every time?" "What's the matter, Abe?" Felix asked. "Are you afraid of the fellow? He couldn't eat you up, Abe." "What do you mean, afraid of him?" Abe exclaimed. "I'm seen by big merchants every day, Felix. I could talk right up to them, too, but this here my partner's affair. He gave Kovalenko in the first place, and—" "What's the use talking, Abe?" Morris interrupted. "If you go home, I go home. So you got to stay, and we would both see the fella. What's the difference, supposing the fella does got a couple of $1 million?" "A couple of $1 million?" Felix said. "Why, I bet you if the fella's got a cent, he's worth $20 million. Abe grew pale. "Say, looky here. Why should I talk to Mr. Steuermann?" he besought. "You could do this without me, Morris." "Don't be a baby, Abe," Morris retorted. "Felix, stay here with us, and—" "Not me, boys," Felix said. "I guess you got to excuse me. I done enough already, and if you don't get home right away, change my underclothes, which they're dripping wet with perspiration, I could sure catch a bad cold." He shook Abe and Morris warmly by the hand, and hardly had the elevator door closed behind him when the showroom became a scene of nervous activity. "Nathan," Abe yelled to the shipping clerk, "fetch the broom. The place looks like a pigsty here." He turned to Morris with excited gesture. "Do me the favor, Morris," he said. "Tell a couple of them young fellows from the cutting room to come in here. Them sample racks ain't been straightened up for a week. I'm going around to the barber shop, Morris. I'll be right back." End of Chapter 7, Part 1. End of Section 10.